The grand hall of the Palacio Al-Ahmadi shimmered under the soft glow of countless golden lanterns, their intricate designs casting dancing shadows across the polished marble floors. A symphony of quiet chatter and traditional string melodies filled the air, a testament to the royal banquet's exquisite grandeur. Rashid Al-Ahmadi, a titan of technology whose empire stretched across continents, stood among his esteemed guests, a figure of imposing dignity in a dark silk bisht draped over his impeccably tailored thobe. His penetrating eyes, usually reflecting an unshakable intelligence, now held a flicker of weary satisfaction as he raised a crystal glass of aged amber whiskey towards his lips, ready to toast another triumph. Just as the rim touched his lower lip, a soft but urgent whisper cut through the genteel murmur of the celebration. "Do not drink that, sir. It has been altered." The words, spoken in perfect, unaccented English, came from behind him. Rashid froze, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly as he slowly lowered the glass, his gaze snapping towards the source. It was Layla, his housemaid, her usually demure posture now rigid with an unfamiliar intensity. Her dark hair was neatly tucked beneath a simple headscarf, and her expressive, vigilant eyes, usually downcast, met his with a startling directness. She wore a modest abaya, but there was an unusual swiftness in her quiet approach. A ripple of hushed curiosity spread through the nearby dignitaries. Rashid's brow, typically smooth, furrowed deeply. "Layla, what are you saying?" His voice, though low, carried the sharp edge of a man unaccustomed to interruption, especially from a member of his household staff, and certainly not in front of senators and foreign investors. The very idea of his maid speaking fluent English was disorienting, let alone her audacious warning. "Are you out of your mind? You're a maid. This is a rare vintage," he hissed, stepping closer, his imposing frame seeming to shrink her further into the rich tapestries. "You do not give me orders." The accusation hung in the air, heavy with unspoken questions about her intelligence and perceived status. Guests pretended not to watch, their eyes darting away and then back, drawn by the sudden, palpable tension surrounding the sheik. Layla's breath came faster, but she stood her ground, her face etched with a silent, unwavering resolve that belied her humble position. The music from the string quartet seemed to pause, suspended in the awkward silence that had abruptly descended upon that corner of the opulent banquet hall. Rashid felt a prickle of annoyance, embarrassed by the public scene her intervention had created, yet a tiny, unsettling seed of doubt had been planted. Her conviction, despite his dismissive tone, was unnerving. Rashid Al-Ahmadi, a prominent tech magnate, is at a royal banquet when his housemaid Layla urgently warns him in perfect Italian not to drink his whiskey, claiming it has been tampered with. This creates a public scene and draws the attention of important guests, as Rashid initially dismisses her, questioning her intelligence and status. Layla's defiance, however, refused to be extinguished by her master's sharp words or the scrutinizing stares of the elite. Her hands, usually adept at delicate household tasks, now fumbled with a modest smartphone, her fingers working with a nervous urgency. The soft lamplight caught the subtle tremble in her grip, yet her gaze remained locked on Rashid, an unspoken plea mingling with iron resolve. "I have proof, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the resumed murmur of the banquet, yet imbued with a gravity that pierced through Rashid's lingering annoyance. "Please just look." Rashid stared at her, his jaw tightened beneath his neatly trimmed beard. The thought of this simple housemaid possessing anything relevant to his security was preposterous, an insult to his meticulously structured world. Yet, something in her expressive, vigilant eyes, a flicker of genuine fear beneath the unwavering determination, held him captive. He hesitated for a long, tense moment, the amber liquid in his glass now appearing ominous, a silent accusation. The air around them felt thick, charged with unseen currents, as if the opulent Palacio Al-Ahmadi itself held its breath. With a curt, almost involuntary nod, Rashid reached out and took the phone. On the small screen, a grainy, slightly blurred video played. It was footage from the bustling palace kitchen hallway, captured moments before the banquet began. The angle was imperfect, likely from a hidden or makeshift camera, but the images were disturbingly clear. A man, dressed in the crisp, white uniform of a palace staff member, his face partially obscured by a serving tray, moved with a calculated nonchalance. Rashid recognized him instantly as one of the newer bartenders assigned to his personal section. The man's movements were practiced, almost choreographed, as he paused near a dimly lit corner. Then, with a subtle, almost imperceptible flick of his wrist, a tiny dark vial appeared in his palm. The reflection of an overhead light briefly glinted off the glass as he discreetly tilted it, allowing a few drops of its sinister content to disappear into the decanter from which Rashid's signature whiskey had just been poured. The short clip ended, leaving behind a chilling silence in Rashid's mind. The intricate golden lanterns, the rich tapestries, the polite chatter of the guests all seemed to recede, replaced by the stark reality of the footage. A cold, unsettling sensation coiled in his gut, replacing his earlier indignation with a slow, creeping dread. The world, which had moments ago been a stage for his triumph, now felt like a dangerous arena where unseen hands moved with lethal intent. Wallahi, the audacity of it. Layla, still pale and trembling slightly in her simple abaya, met his eyes once more. Her silent gaze was a testament to the truth, a stark contrast to his own wavering skepticism. He looked down at the untouched whiskey glass on the side table, its contents no longer a symbol of celebration, but a harbinger of betrayal. The realization was a bitter sip, forcing him to confront the potential reality of the situation. Someone had tried to poison him, and a simple maid had just saved his life. The weight of this new, terrifying truth settled heavily upon Rashid, shifting the very foundations of his perception and challenging everything he believed to be secure within his formidable empire. The chilling revelation of the grainy footage, depicting the bartender's sinister act, had barely settled when Rashid's gaze, now sharpened by suspicion, caught a subtle movement near the service door. There, half concealed behind a heavy velvet curtain, stood a woman. Her abaya, far too oversized for the elegant setting, and a dark headscarf obscured most of her features. Yet her posture was too rigid, her presence too deliberate to be a mere guest mingling at the royal banquet. She wasn't engaging in polite conversation or enjoying the music. She was watching, a silent, predatory stillness that sent a shiver down Rashid's spine, a stark contrast to the opulence of the Palacio Al-Ahmadi. "Omar!" Rashid growled, his voice a low, urgent murmur as he waved his head of security closer. Omar, a man of unwavering loyalty and sharp instincts, appeared at his side almost instantly, his utility thobe a dark silhouette against the shimmering lanterns. There, behind the curtain. "Move now." Rashid's command was crisp, leaving no room for question. The situation had shifted from a private embarrassment to a palpable threat. Omar, without a word, moved with the swift, quiet efficiency of a desert falcon, navigating through the dispersing guests towards the indicated spot. But by the time Omar reached the velvet folds, they were empty. The woman was gone, vanished as if she were a wisp of desert wind. Only a faint, delicate scent lingered in the air, a ghost of lavender that seemed to mock their urgency. Omar's keen eyes swept the area, searching for any sign, but the woman had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only the unsettling echo of her presence. Rashid's jaw tightened. This wasn't impulsive. This was calculated. Wallahi, the layers of this treachery were beginning to peel back, revealing a deeper, more insidious plot. He turned back to Layla, who still stood pale and trembling slightly, but whose vigilant eyes had not left his. The initial shock had given way to a whirlwind of questions in Rashid's mind. "Where did you learn Italian?" he asked, his tone sharp, his gaze unwavering as he scrutinized her modest abaya and simple headscarf. Her fluency, her quick thinking, her unexpected courage, none of it fit the profile of a simple housemaid. "And your background, Layla? Tell me everything." The amber liquid in the untouched glass on the side table seemed to mock him, a silent testament to the fragile illusion of control he had so carefully cultivated within his formidable empire. The true battle, he realized, was only just beginning. The ornate study door slammed, its echoes swallowing the last of the banquet's chaos. Rashid Al-Ahmadi peeled off his silk bisht and threw it across a velvet chaise, then sank into the leather chair behind his desk. He steepled his fingers, eyes narrowed, the lines at his temples hard with distrust. Layla stood a few feet away in a modest abaya, the smartphone with the damning footage clenched in her hand. She had not spoken since they left the hall. Her heart hammered, but her gaze was steady, unreadable. "Who are you, by God?" Rashid asked at last. The calm before a storm. "I'm your maid, sir," she answered softly, unexpectedly firm. "Someone just tried to poison you." He studied her. "Not what I meant. Fluent Italian, security instincts, steady under pressure. You said your grandmother was from Florence. That doesn't explain the rest." Layla inhaled, measured. "At 16, I did an exchange in Florence. After high school, I earned a scholarship to Columbia, linguistics and international relations. I took this job to help my mother, not because I failed a background check." Rashid didn't soften. "Why here? Why me?" She met his stare. "Because even the powerful need someone to dust their secrets." Sheikh Rashid. A shadow of a smile ghosted his face, then fled. He moved to the arched window and watched the city's dark outline. "I built Al-Ahmadi tech to be untouchable. Private servers, encrypted vaults. And someone walks into my home and nearly kills me with a simple trick?" Layla stepped closer, voice low. "They counted on you being distracted. Banquet, guests, your habit of drinking." Rashid's jaw set. "You mean Zara? That she found a stranger to deliver poison? That she planned this from afar?" "Don't underestimate her," Layla said. "You know why you gave me the contingency envelope." Rashid pressed a panel. A hidden door revealed a bank of monitors and live feeds. Omar was already there, scrolling through timestamps. "Find the woman near the curtain," Rashid ordered. "On it, Sheikh Rashid." Camera 7 caught the veiled woman as she left the hall. Facial recognition spun. The footage replayed. The woman moved deliberately, almost theatrically. Her headscarf adjusted to hide her jaw. Layla's voice was a whisper. She knew where the cameras don't reach. Rashid folded his arms. "Then she's been here before. She's familiar." Omar added, "Either ex-staff or inside help." Rashid remembered Zara's copies of old palace plans, taken when they were married, when she oversaw the remodeling. "So we assume it's her?" Omar asked. Rashid tapped the armrest, weighing betrayals. "We confirm before we accuse," he said finally. "If we're wrong and this leaks, it'll look like desperation. By God, we cannot allow that." Layla closed the distance, quieter still. "And if we're right, she's many steps ahead. We need precision, and eyes where you can't be." Rashid's gaze shifted, something like resolve hardening it. From a hidden compartment, he produced a small velvet box and handed it to her. "What is this?" "Security clearance," he said flatly. "A key card. Access to the second-floor archives and the surveillance control room. If you're my eyes, I want you to see everything. I trust no one. That's why I'm still alive." Layla felt the box's weight as a hinge between two worlds, ordinary service and a dangerous, unseen front. The alliance between them was not born of trust, but of shared suspicion, a mutual understanding of the threat closing in. She met his look and nodded. "Understood, Sheikh Rashid." Layla's fingers closed around the cold metal keycard, its weight a sudden, tangible burden. The trust Rashid had just placed in her settled heavy in her gut. In the opulent, shadowed study, they exchanged a silent promise, a pact born of shared vulnerability. His raw confession of distrust lingered in the stillness, making the stakes unmistakable. One misstep could be catastrophic. This was no mere errand. It was an immersion into the dangerous currents of his life, a role she hadn't sought but now embraced. "There is something else," Layla murmured, the words cutting through the taut air. While waiting, she had overheard fragments, whispers that felt misplaced. Rashid leaned forward, the rigid line of his posture softening into curiosity. "Tell me everything," he urged, voice low and urgent despite the composed mask. "The name Zara Al-Ahmadi came up," Layla said, watching him closely. His jaw tightened, his usual calm hardened. A flash of distaste crossed his face, quickly concealed. "My ex-wife," he said flatly, dismissive, bitter, jealous. "If she were involved, it would be petty vengeance. She wouldn't interfere with my affairs." He waved the thought away. Layla did not relent, perhaps, but the way it was spoken suggested presence, influence. Spoken as if she would not come to speak. That implies manipulation from the shadows rather than open confrontation. Zara prefers to wield power subtly. Her absence at the banquet says a lot. If she wanted a scene, she would come with fanfare to humiliate you. Silence is her weapon. The dismissive facade cracked. Rashid paced, his steps muffled by the silken rug, certainty giving way to unease. Layla's implication, of a cunning, shadowed opponent, struck a chord he'd rather ignore. Downstairs, the grand banquet hall, once full of laughter and polite chatter, was fraying. The Sheikh's absence left a hollow that spread through the room. Guests exchanged guarded looks. Murmurs moved like a cold draft across gilt and crystal. The music faltered, its celebratory edge blunted. Revelers grew uneasy. A current of apprehension replaced mirth. Layla, still replaying Rashid's reaction to Zara's name, moved from the study along a deserted corridor toward a private gallery. In a recessed alcove, she noticed a forgotten display cabinet. Inside, among artifacts of his past, rested a tarnished silver frame. The photograph captured a younger Rashid, smiling without the weight he now carried, standing beside a striking woman, Zara al-Ahmadi. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Her arm was possessively linked through his. The image struck Layla with an unexpected pang. It hinted at a different Rashid, capable of open affection before power and betrayal hardened him. The contrast to the guarded man she knew was stark, an ache of lost innocence. The photograph felt like a warning left in a corner, a whisper from when love might have been more than politics. Zara's presence in that past suggested an intimacy that could translate into devotion or a deep, festering resentment, either of which could now threaten his present. The old photograph, clutched in Layla's hand, felt heavy with the weight of a past she could only imagine. Rashid and Zara, younger, their smiles untroubled by the machinations of power, stood against the backdrop of a vibrant marketplace. It was a fragment of a life that felt impossibly distant from the opulence of the Al-Ahmadi palace, now tainted by suspicion. Layla gently placed the picture back on the shelf, the metallic scent of old paper clinging to her fingers. The grand banquet downstairs, a symphony of hushed conversations and clinking silverware, had dissolved into a restless murmur, the guests' whispers growing louder with Rashid's prolonged absence. The air, once festive, now carried a subtle tremor of unease. Omar, Rashid's loyal head of security, a man whose presence was as solid as the palace walls, entered the study. His face was a mask of grim determination as he carried a tablet, its screen glowing with the stark reality of surveillance footage. "Sir, we have something," he stated, his voice low and devoid of emotion, yet the tremor in his hands betrayed a deeper concern. The footage, grainy and distorted, flickered onto the main display. It showed a palace staff member, the same one who had prepared Rashid's poisoned drink, receiving a small, almost imperceptible object from a figure shrouded in a voluminous abaya and a thick veil. The woman's face was entirely obscured, her identity a deliberate secret. Rashid leaned forward, his eyes, usually sharp and commanding, narrowed with intense scrutiny. The image paused, highlighting the moment of clandestine exchange. "Zoom in on her gait," Rashid commanded, his voice tight. Omar complied, and the figure's movements became clearer. Despite the heavy fabric, a subtle, almost imperceptible unevenness in her step became visible. It was a familiar rhythm, one etched into Rashid's memory from a lifetime of shared moments. "Zara," he breathed, the name a bitter taste on his tongue, a reluctant recognition, even in disguise. That walk, it's hers. Layla, who had been observing quietly, stepped closer, her keen eyes following the movement on the screen. "She always favored her right hip." "Wallahi," Layla confirmed, her voice soft but steady. "An old injury, from a fall she took years ago. Sciatic nerve damage." The words hung in the air, solidifying the chilling truth. This was no impulsive act of a jilted lover. It was a meticulously orchestrated plot, born from a mind that knew Rashid's world, his palace, and even the intimate details of his former wife's physical ailments. The realization settled in Rashid's gut like a cold stone. This was deeper, far more insidious than he had initially dared to imagine. He turned to Layla, his gaze piercing, a flicker of raw suspicion in his eyes. "How do I know you are not a part of this, Layla?" His voice was raspy, laced with a lingering mistrust that touched everything and everyone around him. Layla met his gaze unflinchingly, her expression unyielding. "Because if I were Habibi," she replied, her voice calm and even, "you would be dead already." The blunt honesty, delivered without a hint of fear or artifice, sliced through the tension in the room. A dry, humorless laugh escaped Rashid's lips, a sound that held no mirth, only a profound and weary acknowledgement of truth. "Mashallah," he murmured, shaking his head. That is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in years. The alliance, fragile and forged in the crucible of suspicion, had just been tempered by an uncomfortable, undeniable truth. The fight had truly begun. The palace corridors at dawn were a held breath, until a frantic cry from the staff quarters split the hush. Rashid, already awake and turning over the night's revelations, felt cold dread knot his stomach. Layla arrived at his door moments later, face drawn. "It's the attendant, sire," she said, clipped voice frayed by an unfamiliar tremor. They moved quickly through long halls. The marble floor drank the pale light. The attendant's cell was wrong in ways that sank into Rashid's chest. The young man lay slack on his cot, waxen, breathing in shallow, uncertain pulls. A half-empty vial of sedative lay discarded on the floor, an awkward attempt at staging a suicide. The air tasted faintly sweet with the drug, a recent intrusion in the tight, stripped space. Rashid knelt, fingers pressing the attendant's clammy neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, thin and stubborn. His eyes took in the small, deliberate details, the careful placement of the body, the neatness of the scene, the absence of the ragged signs of despair. It felt arranged, too tidy to be real. The vial, the posture, the theatricality, they read as a message more than a confession. He rose slowly, jaw hardening. "She isn't just trying to get rid of me," he said, low and steady. "She's cleaning house, removing anyone who could have seen or heard something." The thought sank like a stone. This was not a blow struck in blind fury. Zara was pruning connections, severing witnesses, isolating him with precision. Layla watched him, her gaze assessing rather than surprised. "And the motive," she said after a beat, "may be deeper than revenge for what she lost. Maybe it's for something she believes was always owed to her, an old debt you left unpaid." Her voice was calm, measured, and it drew a distant memory to the surface of Rashid's mind, a half-remembered ledger of obligations he'd preferred to forget. He felt a small, reluctant gratitude toward her. She read the currents of this place better than he ever could. Her loyalty was a steady light in an increasingly dark house. He accepted the grim shape of it and moved to a tapestry depicting an ancient desert battle. Behind it, a concealed compartment sighed open. Rashid's hand trembled as he drew out a heavy, unmarked envelope of browned parchment. Across its face, in bold, careful calligraphy, was a single phrase, "Contingency B." The envelope carried the gravity of a last resort, a failsafe he had hoped would remain sealed. He held it up, feeling its weight. "Take this," he said to Layla, voice now controlled, authoritative. "Guard it with your life. Do not open it, under no circumstance." He paused, the unspoken clause swelling between them, his eyes fixed on hers, steady and urgent. "Unless," he added, each syllable a small hammer, "I disappear, completely." The words hung in the pale hall, and for a moment the palace seemed to hold its breath again, as if the dawn itself had tightened into a wire. The morning light, thin and cold, sifted through the carved mashrabia of Rashid's private chambers, failing to lift the weight left by last night's revelations. The image of the palace attendant, pale, still, an unwitting instrument in Zara's scheme, sat like ash in his mind. He paced the plush rugs, the rustle of his thobe a soft metronome for the unrest inside him. Layla stood by the arched window, a dark shape against the first pale day, watchful and composed. He turned to her, suspicion sharpened but softened by something like respect. "Your fluency in Italian, your studies in linguistics and international relations, your scholarship," he said, voice stripped of its earlier edge, "do not fit the story of a simple housemaid, Layla." He let the accusation hang, a thin thread between them. "Tell me your truth, wallahi, all of it." Her hands rested calmly on her abaya. "My grandmother was from Florence," she said, voice low and steady. "She raised me. After high school, I won a scholarship to a good university. I studied, yes, but life did not follow only ambition. My mother needed help. I took this post because duty and necessity left me no better choice." She spoke with quiet dignity, her words folded into the room, softening his mistrust without erasing the sting of concealment. Rashid saw her anew, not merely staff, but a capable woman who had chosen restraint over display. Yet the fact she had hidden layers beneath his roof prickled like a nettle against his pride. He moved to his desk, fingers trailing over polished wood. "I built Al-Amadi Tech Solutions to be untouchable," he murmured. half to the grain, half to himself. Private servers, encrypted vaults, defenses that should have outwitted whole states. Yet someone walked into my home, used a common trick, tried to take my life, and now works to unmake me from within. Each word carried disappointment and a slow, aching fury, the betrayal of trust, or the cost of his complacency. Layla stepped closer, her tone clinical and almost impatient. They counted on habit, Sheikh. The banquet, the guests, your evening ritual. Routine is a door. You think Zara did this? He asked, jaw tight. Her name tasted like old wounds. That she hired a stranger to deliver poison. That she pulled strings from afar. The possibility landed heavy. Layla's gaze was steady. Do not underestimate her, Habibi. Her absence, the way she moves in the footage, the speed with which she silenced the attendant. It all points to design. She cleans whatever threatens her, quickly, without hesitation. The implication hung between them like a kept breath. What loyalties were facades? What other secrets lay folded beneath polite faces? The study, once a refuge of control, felt exposed, a stage where mask after mask came away. Rashid imagined the palace as less fortress than field of old battles, its foundations jarred by ghosts that had learned to move like vipers. Layla's assessment sketched a longer game. Zara's patience, her appetite for planning, her willingness to sacrifice pawns to reach deeper aims. Outside, the city gathered light. Inside, two figures measured the distance between betrayal and response, aware that servants, guarded servers, and maps of loyalty might be the only shields left against a woman who had already proven she could wait and strike. Rashid's thoughts kept returning to the sting of Layla's hidden knowledge, but the cool clarity of the investigation demanded his attention. Zara, his once beloved, had become a silhouette of betrayal. The image hardened Rashid's resolve. They replayed the surveillance footage, frame by frame, watching shadowed corridors and quiet doorways for the slightest misstep, the misplaced look that might unravel the plot. Layla, eyes still carrying a soft, guilty afterglow, paused the footage on a nearly invisible frame. In the peripheral vision of a camera by the service entrance, a woman's figure slipped past, face half hidden, posture familiar. Rashid whispered the name before it reached his lips. Samira. Once Zara's confidant, once woven into their lives with domestic ease, now seen guiding a palace staffer. The staff member, a young man Rashid vaguely remembered in the kitchens, followed Samira's subtle gestures and slipped through a rarely used access point, carrying a suspicious package. Betrayal tightened at Rashid's ribs. Samira, long a quiet presence at Zahra's side, had become an active instrument of this clandestine operation. A sudden memory cut through Rashid's methodical calm. Zahra's old pride in knowing the palace's every corridor. She had possessed copies of the original architectural plans, a detail he had once noted as mere meticulousness. Now it landed like a warning. Those schematics would be invaluable to anyone planning infiltration, escape, or sabotage within his domain. The thought forced a new shape on his suspicion. Zara was not a passive player. She likely engineered the scheme, the architect behind the web. They widened their search. A mastermind needs an insider, someone rooted in palace routines with unquestioned access. Their attention turned to the guest list from the recent royal banquet, the perfect cover for subtle movements. Layla, with a sharp eye and a surprising fluency in court detail, helped comb through hundreds of names until one stood out like a wound. Tariq, Zahra's paternal cousin. Tariq's face carried the comfortable blankness of the expected guest. By day, he served as Rashid's head of acquisitions, a role of deep trust and access. His duties gave him reach, supplies, shipments, timing, the quiet knowledge of what came and went. His familial tie to Zahra turned familiarity into threat. The pieces fell into place with an awful logic. The banquet provided opportunity, his position provided the means, and his bond to Zahra supplied motive. Rashid's stomach went cold. He tried Tariq's lines with a desperate intensity. The calls went unanswered, each ring erasing a sliver of hope. He sent his most trusted guards to Tariq's city flat and his country estate. Hours later, the reports were grim and plain. Tariq was gone. Apartments emptied, offices stripped of personal things. No witnesses to his departure since the banquet night. The meticulous erasure of his trace confirmed the worst. Tariq was the insider, the conduit through which Zahra's poison had begun moving. The conspiracy tightened like a noose around Rashid's circle. What had been a private wound now threatened the entire realm's stability. He felt the betrayal not just as loss, but as a strategic breach within the heart of power, and the list of allies and assumptions he had once trusted seemed suddenly fragile, disposable, and dangerously porous. The cold realization settled over Rashid like a shroud, heavier than any silk bisht, chilling him far more profoundly than the crisp mountain air outside. Zara was not merely attempting to end his life. Her objective was far more insidious, a deliberate dismantling of his empire from within. Her strategy was not a direct strike, but a slow, venomous unraveling, a calculated campaign to sow seeds of doubt among his most loyal staff, to erode the trust of his board, and ultimately, to make him question his own judgment. The poisoned chalice had been merely a distraction, a dramatic overture to a much grander, more destructive symphony of betrayal. Wallahi, she played a long game, one he had gravely underestimated. His jaw tightened, the lines of exhaustion around his eyes deepening as he stared at the empty screen where Tariq's contact information had been. Tariq's disappearance was not an escape. It was a confirmation of his deep involvement, a final damning piece in Zara's intricate puzzle. Rashid's mind raced, connecting the dots of every recent financial anomaly, every hushed boardroom whisper he had dismissed as mere business friction. He now understood with chilling clarity. Tariq, his own head of acquisitions, Zara's blood cousin, had been strategically positioned, a serpent within his most trusted circle. There had to be a ledger, a hidden account, a planted data mine within his company's vast and complex financial systems, designed to implicate him, to trigger a vote of no confidence, to collapse the very foundations of Al-Ahmadi Tech Solutions. The image of his empire as a castle built on shifting sands, a metaphor Layla often used, resonated with terrifying accuracy. Layla, ever perceptive, observed the grim evolution of Rashid's understanding. Her silence was not passive. It was a keen assessment of the shifting tides. She stepped forward, her modest abaya a stark contrast to the opulence of the study. Yet her presence radiated an undeniable authority. "If Tariq has been leaking information, Sheikh Rashid," she began, her voice steady and measured, "if he has planted something in your financials, then a targeted sweep is insufficient. We need a full, uncompromised internal sweep. Every email, every call log, every physical access record, every transaction since the acquisition deals of last quarter. Wallahi, leave no stone unturned. The jinn has begun its dance, and we must find its tracks before it consumes everything." Her words, sharp and precise, cut through the fog of Rashid's anger and forced a strategic clarity. He nodded, a flicker of grudging admiration in his penetrating eyes. Layla was more than his eyes. She was becoming his strategist, his indispensable ally in this rapidly escalating war. Reaching for the secure landline on his desk, he dialed his CFO, his voice now devoid of any tremor, imbued with a steely resolve. "Cancel the Zurich meeting," he commanded, his words clipped and authoritative. "Lock down all third-party accounts. Find me every file Tariq Al-Ahmadi has touched in the last 6 months. Everything." He hung up, then turned to Layla, his gaze firm. "You are not just a maid, Layla," he declared, the phrase now carrying the weight of a solemn oath. "From this moment, you are my internal eyes, my shadow in the heart of this storm. Wallahi, your counsel is invaluable. Show me the paper trail. Lead the way." Layla met his gaze, unflinching, her expression a mirror of his own unwavering determination. The hunt had begun, and together they would follow the serpent's winding path, even into the darkest corners of his betrayed empire. The sweep of Al-Ahmadi Tech Solutions' digital archives, driven by Layla with a quiet, burning focus, began to pay its toll. Hours smeared together, code, encrypted folders, hidden caches. She sat in the surveillance room, face lit by a pale monitor, coffee congealing at her elbow. Omar, a steady presence at the adjacent console, cross-checked logs with patient precision, his jaw as tight as hers. Then a cluster of flagged messages surfaced, sent from Tariq's corporate laptop, routed through an offshore server. One attachment opened like a wound. It was a draft board resolution, clinical, precise, demanding Rashid Al-Ahmadi's removal as CEO. The language was legalistic, but the intent was surgical. Layla's breath shortened. This was no smear. It was a coup in embryo, paperwork shaped like a no-confidence blade. She traced the cursor over phrases that sought to hollow the company from within. "He's trying to trigger a no-confidence vote, Sheikh Rashid," she said, the words solid and low. Rashid, who had been pacing the rug behind her, stopped and let out a sound that was part exhale, part surrender. The confirmation of a private dread settled on him. "He's setting the dominoes," he said, voice cooled by disbelief and anger. Trust had been threaded through family ties. Now those threads were being tugged toward ruin. The realization tasted metallic, like coins burned on the tongue. "We don't have days to react, Layla," he added, turning. "We have hours. Every second counts." Layla's answer came with the clipped economy of someone used to digging for truths. "I need full access to finance records. Private ledgers, off-books transfers, anything unaudited. The places they hide things." Rashid's nod was quick, decisive. "You'll have every file, but know this. The people behind it are not amateurs. They will counterpunch and they will not hesitate." A shadow passed his face. "They'll go dirty." She met his look without blinking. "Neither am I, Sheikh Rashid," she said. It wasn't bravado. It was the calm of a person who had learned how to hold her center while digging into cold data and colder motives. That night, the city felt like a held breath as she walked back to her modest flat in the district of ceramists. Kilns cooled to the scent of smoke and clay. Incense threaded the air. Familiar comforts that tonight landed like fragile things. The stairwell light hummed. Her key scraped. Wood leaned into the lock with its familiar complaint. Inside, the apartment smelled of tea and old paper, small ordinaries that usually steadied her. She paused on the threshold. Something white, marginal and wrong, lay half-pushed under the doormat. The envelope was plain, blank of sender, its paper cool and too crisp. Inside was one photograph. Rashid sat in his study, the leather and books framing him. In the background, almost incidental, was Layla, her silhouette small, a watchful figure at the edge. In the glazed corner of the frame was a reflection, a veiled woman on the street, features hidden, watching through the glass. On the back, in careful, eerie script, "You're already part of this." The paper trembled in her hands. It was a message and a map at once. No longer an abstract war over power, but a personal siege. Her life, once separated by geography and class from Rashid's marble rooms, had been folded into his danger. The photograph felt like a marker planted in her home. Outside, somewhere beyond the window, someone had chosen to make her visible. The thought threaded cold through her. This was no longer only his fight. It was hers, involuntary and intimate, and the cost of stepping back had quietly been erased. Rashid's polished desk, usually a shrine to order, bore a single photograph that unsettled the room. A veiled woman reflected in glass, intimate and intrusive. Layla watched him, his control cracking into something raw. "This proves it, Sheikh Rashid," she said, voice steady despite the cold that threaded it. "The leak is deeper than Tariq. Someone else has close access. They're watching us." Rashid's silence confirmed the presence of unseen eyes. The photo's placement, tucked beneath Layla's doorframe, felt deliberate, invasive. It was no longer mere corporate warfare. It had become personal, intimate, and dangerous. Trust was suddenly scarce. Omar arrived, keffiyeh skewed, tablet aglow. "We traced the IP for Tariq's last transfer," he reported. "It hops. Berlin, Dubai, Bucharest. Final hop through an encrypted VPN to an abandoned warehouse in the spice souk." Rashid straightened, a predator roused. "The souk? That old property?" he asked. Omar nodded. "A shell company owns it. Zahra al-Ahmadi helped set it up in 2014, dormant until last week. The name settled between them like ice. Zahra's hand reached further than anyone had expected, into attempts, into infrastructure. Layla and Rashid exchanged a look. The case was no longer simple sabotage. "We go," Rashid decided. He looked at Layla. "You're coming?" she asked, a flicker of surprise in her tone. "You're already involved," he answered, steady. The souk loomed under a sky pregnant with rain that never fell. The warehouse was anonymous, boarded windows, rusted doors that moaned in a dry wind. Omar disabled cameras before they closed the gap. Inside, The air smelled of stale spices and damp concrete. Footprints marred the dust. A laptop dock sat emptied, and a discarded coffee cup hinted at a recent human presence. No sign of forced entry. Someone had keys, Layla noted, sensing the quiet evidence of access. Omar examined a power box. This was a relay point. Temporary drop, encrypted transfers. Old school, hard to trace. Rashid moved slowly, eyes roaming the walls. Zara loved chess metaphors, he said, a bitter edge to his irony. Control the board, don't chase the pieces. This isn't the attack, it's the distraction. On the wall, a bulletin board held one photograph. Rashid shaking Senator Hamid Grigg's hand at a gala. A red X sliced across the senator's face. Layla felt the chill again. "Who is he?" she asked. "An old ally," Rashid replied, voice flat, more bark than bite. "But he blocked a cybersecurity bill last month that would have helped Al-Ahmadi tech." Layla's concern deepened. "Is this about you, or bigger?" she asked, fingers brushing the photo in the empty dock. "Bigger," she said. "What if your death is the first domino? If they want your company down, they could topple political support too." Omar stiffened, hand near the dagger at his thobe. "Coordinated," he said. "Layers. Government. Corporate." Rashid's whisper carried the weight of a man who had just seen a battlefield outline. "Then it's war," he said, "and we're already behind." Outside, the desert rose in Layla's mind as a stubborn emblem. Resilience they would need to meet whatever came next. The echo of Rashid's words, "Then it's war," hung in the dust of the spice souk warehouse. Layla, reeling from names and betrayals, felt that truth settle into her bones. The desert rose, stubborn and alive, bloomed in her mind against the dark. This was no longer a whisper campaign, but an open battle. She had been dragged from pawn to soldier. Back at Palacio Al-Ahmadi, the polished hall's silence felt like a fragile mask. In a plain abaya on cool marble, Layla plunged into the digital depths, a quiet hunter in a web of lies. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced speed, tracing Samira's faint trail through a sprawling digital desert. The former confidant had left breadcrumbs, transaction logs, server accesses, encrypted messages. Layla cross-referenced feeds and ledgers with relentless focus. A pattern emerged, blunt and ugly, covert wire transfers, hidden behind shell companies and offshore accounts flowing into Tariq's accounts. The evidence hardened into a mosaic of betrayal. Samira was not merely a messenger. She was the financial conduit that tied Zara's secret hands to the exposed insider. As the last data packet confirmed the scheme, Layla's secure phone, usually mute, buzzed with an unknown number. One urgent word flashed on the screen. "Run." Contextless and anonymous, it cut through the surveillance room's hum and landed like a warning. Her heart hammered, an immediate drum of danger. This was personal. Someone knew where she was and what she had uncovered. A soft shuffle by the window, faint against the city's distant din, shattered the apartment's thin sense of safety. Layla moved with the calm precision of someone who had long practiced disappearing. Her go-bag, worn, compact, stocked with essentials, encrypted devices, and emergency cash, sat beneath the bed. She grabbed it, each motion efficient and economical. She slipped down the back stairwell, her abaya whispering as she descended into the alley's cool shadow. Adrenaline sharpened everything, the texture of brick, the echo of distant footsteps, a stray clatter that might mean pursuit. From the alley's concealment, she peered back. Two figures moved toward her door, their intent clear. One carried a crowbar that caught the streetlight like a hungry eye. The other cradled a signal jammer, a device meant to sever all contact. They weren't there for valuables. They were there to silence her permanently. Layla melted through the maze of alleys, a ghost in the moonlit city. Her escape a tense, breathless ballet. By dawn, she was bruised and scraped, muscles aching, before the carved gates of Palacio Al-Ahmadi. Rashid opened the heavy door, his face a hard mask of concern. His eyes met hers with unspoken understanding. "They came for me, Sheikh Rashid," she said, voice steady, though terror still thrummed beneath it. "They knew who I was. They came specifically for me." She did not need to elaborate. Her arrival and state said enough. Rashid stepped aside without questioning, his stance acknowledging the war now at their threshold. Layla accepted the change in herself. No longer only a maid, no longer only a strategist, but a soldier in a widening conflict that threatened to consume them all. The line had been crossed, irrevocably, and there was no turning back. The command center at Palazzo Al-Ahmadi, usually a low hum of orderly focus, thrummed now with taut, nervous energy. Layla sat before the monitors, face still showing the faint bruises of her narrow escape, her clothes damp from the night. Returning to Rashid's gilded halls as a bruised but resolved fighter had hardened her role in this escalating conflict he called a war. Every pixel, every line of code felt like a skirmish. Omar, a steady presence at her side, his keffiyeh askew and brow drawn, matched her intensity. The tone had shifted from defense to an aggressive hunt for the true enemy. They tunneled into the company's digital underworld, following Tariq's compromised credentials across a labyrinth of servers. Layla's fingers moved with practiced speed, tracing strange footprints through firewalls and encrypted channels, while Omar guided the architecture of access points. Hours blurred into a haze of logs and timestamps until a cluster of entries snagged her attention, a thread veering into a neglected corner of the system. This isn't part of the usual archives, wallahi. Rashid, who had watched their relentless work from the room's edge, stepped closer. The name tightened something in his face. VRS, he murmured, as if remembering an old wound. Zara's. She kept a private environment when she consulted for the board. The connection fell into place like a missing tile. Zara's intellect, or the echo of it, still haunted the company's innards. Omar's question, practical and blunt, broke the quiet. Why would Tariq access her old files? Sheikh Rashid. Layla's gaze held the blinking cursor. To copy them, she said, voice plain and cold. Or to wake dormant scripts. They opened the subdirectory logs. An experimental AI protocol Zara had built, once judged too unstable, and ordered shelved by Rashid himself. It had been engineered to anticipate market reactions to threats, a tool turned weapon, but its unpredictability had buried it. Until now. Rashid's jaw tightened as pieces aligned into a terrifying picture. If Jinn is active again, he said, slow and hard. They're planning a financial strike. The room absorbed the weight of that. Omar's hand went to the dagger at his thobe as if physical steel could defend against a virtual assault. Rashid looked at them with a cold flare of resolve. By staging a breach, he said, a fabricated hack that looks authentic enough to trigger a stock collapse, investor panic, a media storm. Jinn can weave a narrative so fast and convincing the truth will drown under the lies, wallahi. Layla straightened, fatigue smoothing into sharp clarity. The realization landed like ice. They don't want to kill you now, Sheikh Rashid, she said without heat, the room's gold and glass reflecting her words. They intend to erase you, your name, your company, your legacy, to bury you under the ruins of your own empire. Zara's vengeance, amplified through Jinn, had become a digital monster bent on total annihilation. This was no longer a war. It was an attempt to make Rashid vanish from history, leaving nothing but sand and silence. The mountain ascent felt like a journey into deep silence, each winding turn isolating Rashid from the world below. His mind raced, weighing every angle of Zara's urgent summons, risks of betrayal against a faint, desperate hope. The chalet, a stark stone sentinel, emerged from the dusk, its dark windows mirroring his profound apprehension. Killing the engine, the sudden quiet, amplified his heartbeat. Trap or truth? He stepped out, the biting wind a stark contrast to his inner turmoil, a cold, unsettling promise of what awaited him. Inside, Zara stood by a roaring fireplace, her silhouette softened by the dancing flames. She turned, her face a complex tapestry of defiance and a deep, weary regret. Rashid, her voice was a low murmur, I know you must think the absolute worst of me. He stood impassive, his gaze unwavering, searching for any hint of falsehood. My initial intention was not your downfall. It was to shake you from what I perceived as dangerous complacency, to expose the insidious shadows gathering around your throne. A heavy pause followed, laden with their shared, fractured past. But the Shadow Society are masters of manipulation. They twisted my frustration, fueled my concerns, and transformed a desperate plea for vital reform into a brutal coup. They took my initiative, my fervent desire to safeguard our heritage, and warped it into a weapon entirely beyond my control. Her hands trembled perceptibly as she reached for a slender USB drive resting on the carved wooden mantelpiece. The jinn operation? Yes, that was initially my concept. A controlled internal pressure point for necessary change. But it was swiftly co-opted, hijacked by their dark agenda, spiraling violently beyond anything I ever intended. This drive, she held it out, her eyes pleading for a modicum of understanding, contains irrefutable internal campaign files, encrypted communications, undeniable proof of their pervasive infiltration and expansive reach. It will expose them all. Just as Rashid reached for the crucial device, the distinct crunch of tires on gravel outside shattered the fragile piece. The chalet door, previously a barrier against the night, opened again, revealing Layla. Her entrance was silent, but her eyes, sharp and alert, immediately swept the room, assessing the scene with practiced precision before settling on Zara, then Rashid. Her presence was a powerful, silent affirmation of their precarious situation. A swift, almost imperceptible exchange of glances passed between Rashid and Layla, a quick, silent nod. Zara's raw confession, the tangible evidence she offered, Layla's unexpected arrival, and her vigilant assessment of the scene all converged into a single, undeniable conclusion. Zara was no longer merely an adversary. She stood ready to aid in dismantling the monstrous entity she had inadvertently helped empower, her fragile alliance a vital, if reluctant, promise against the encroaching darkness. The quiet chalet in the Omani mountains held its breath, the calm before a fragile, urgent storm. Layla moved with the lithe precision of a desert cat, fingers finding the slender USB and slotting it into her secure tablet. The room smelled faintly of wood smoke. Silence thinned into questions. Rashid stood like a carved statue, watching her exacting motions, eyes flicking between her focused profile and Zara's worn, waiting face. Zara's confession, that her first alarm had been warped into a monstrous coup by the Shadow Society, still lay between them, a bitter, sharp thing that demanded reckoning. On the tablet, encrypted lines unfurled, slowly surrendering truth. Code, messages, internal plans that revealed a conspiracy vaster and meaner than Rashid had feared. Zara watched Layla with something like awe. The woman who had been a quiet maid, an observer at the edge of things, had become a strategist, her mind a blade. The files confirmed the worst. The Shadow Society had threaded agents and influence into media, regulators, and corporate boards. Their next wave would not merely topple Al-Ahmadi Tech Solutions. It aimed to erase Rashid's name, to cripple the region's digital backbone. The most chilling detail, a premeditated media blackout, a synchronized information vacuum crafted to stifle any counter-narrative. The audacity felt obscene. Layla's hands hesitated, then moved faster. "They're not trying only to shutter your company, Sheikh Rashid," she said, voice taut. "They mean to engineer a narrative desert, a place where only their version of events survives. The blackout is the keystone." She met his eyes, then Zara's, all fierce intent. "A blackout in one place won't hold everywhere. We must hit them everywhere at once. If we release the truth in multiple countries simultaneously, their suppression will fracture. Truth leaks through seams." Rashid let the word settle. Simultaneous. It felt like a new war drum. But how? Their reach is vast. Zara lifted her chin. "I have contacts. Swiss press. Some trusted voices in London and Zurich who have grown tired of the society's shadow." Her pallor remained, but purpose warmed her gaze. They need a reason to break silence. This could be it. Layla's expression tightened with predatory calm. "I have networks," she said. "Secure channels, verified documents, timed embargoes across social platforms. We can bypass their filters, flood servers and feeds before they can react." The chalet, once an escape from the world, reshaped itself into a clandestine command post. Maps, contact lists, timelines spread across the wooden table, lit by the tablet's glow. Each movement became deliberate choreography. Whispers swelled into plans. They built the operation with slow, fierce care. Zara's contacts opened doors to journalists in Geneva, Zurich, London, conduits for stories that could not be silenced. Layla prepared encrypted bundles, rehearsing the timing for an 8 a.m. Geneva release, a synchronized strike meant to overwhelm the society's blackout. They discussed contingencies, diversion tactics, multiple release points to ensure redundancy. The gamble was raw, Success would clear Rashid and expose mercenary tactics. Failure could bury them all. Still, as final pieces clicked into place and the night wrapped the mountains in quiet, their resolve hardened. They would not only defend, they would strike back. A coordinated global counterstrike meant to drag the Shadow Society into daylight and restore truth where it had been stolen. Wallahi, the fight had truly begun. The world woke to truth at 8 a.m. Geneva time. A coordinated counterstrike detonated across global networks, and within minutes, headlines from London to Sydney blazed. Al-Ahmadi versus Shadow Society, the Omani revelation. Social feeds swelled with links, screenshots, and the trending tag, "Should Truth at Dawn?" Zara's confession from a secluded chalet, internal audio logs from the Shadow Society, and leaked AI sequences were dissected and amplified. The digital desert the society had cultivated flooded with an unforgiving tide that washed away their lies. Rashid felt the tremor, a seismic shift in public consciousness. Outside Geneva's Palais de Rumine, Rashid mounted a sleek podium, his dark bisht stark against the cool morning. Layla stood beside him, her modest abaya steady as a presence of quiet resolve, a living bridge between his old seclusion and the transparent future he now embraced. In shadowed distance, protected by the Swiss council, Zara watched, her face lined with regret and defiance, yet threaded with a fragile hope. "Good morning." Rashid's voice, stripped of command and steadied by purpose, fell across the reporters and cameras. "I stand here not to deny wrongdoing, but to correct it." Al-Ahmadi Tech Solutions was infiltrated by a coordinated campaign engineered by the Shadow Society and operated through Jinn, an AI I helped design but never meant to weaponize. He let the silence settle, then continued with methodical clarity. In the past 48 hours, they had released internal communications, server logs, AI command sequences, and names tied to the plot. Today, I call for an immediate international inquiry into the Shadow Society's activities and for legislative cooperation, Congress, the EU Parliament, and the Omani Federal Office to ensure private intelligence firms are bound by law and ethics. Reporters surged, voices overlapping, questions about Jinn, about culpability, and the inevitable demand, "Where is Zara Al-Ahmadi?" Rashid exchanged a barely visible nod with Layla and shifted the moment. Miss Al-Ahmadi's contributions to exposing this truth were essential. She is beyond my immediate reach now, but her message echoes across borders. Phones flashed. The frenzy intensified. Zara, hidden and listening, exhaled slowly, a tremor of relief barely visible. The operation, an odds-defying gamble, had worked. The poisoned narrative had finally turned, exposing its architects. Behind thick, soundproof doors in a secure monitoring room, Rashid, Layla, and legal teams tracked the reaction as it spread. The firestorm grew. Within hours, the Shadow Society's assets were frozen across jurisdictions. Their digital tendrils were severed. Hedge funds that had pounced on Jinn's engineered panic reversed course, their short positions dissolving. In New York, Senator Hamid Griggs publicly demanded stricter regulation of private lobbying networks, lending political weight to calls for accountability. Word from Oman confirmed the counterstrike's reach. The Shadow Society's safe house had been raided. Samira, Zara's former confidant and an unwilling pawn, was in protective custody. Simon Reeves, the elusive CEO, had been located but not yet apprehended. His phone buzzed with empty contacts and vanished command lines. In the conference room, Layla leaned back, fatigue heavy in her posture, but a quiet triumph in her eyes. "We did it, Sheikh Rashid," she murmured. Rashid nodded, his smile half-formed, shadowed by the cost. "Yes, Layla, but collateral damage remains." She met his gaze, clear and unyielding. "Zara is safe. Samira is safe. Now, Habibi." The battle shifts to policy and legacy. His eyes, steady and widened with new resolve, scanned the horizon of responsibility. "This is where we rebuild," he said. "We rebuild in the light of truth. The battle, though not over, has turned." This thought lingered in the air, a fragile hope clinging to the new dawn that followed Rashid's press conference. Investigations had begun. Samira was safe, but the victory felt partial, a mere skirmish won in a larger unseen war. For Layla, the fragile peace settled after the exposé shattered with a single anonymous message, delivered in the dead of night to a secure line. It arrived subtly, an encoded string on a burner phone she rarely used, a device meant for the shadows she thought she had left behind. The words, chillingly precise, spoke of her mother, of the quiet streets in the district of ceramists, of vulnerabilities Layla had worked tirelessly to protect. An icy tendril of fear wrapped around her heart, tightening with each rereading. Her mother, her anchor, now a potential pawn in a game Layla was playing for the highest stakes. She showed the message to Rashid. His jaw tightened. The lines of his face hardened into a grim mask of resolve. "They're adapting," he stated, his voice low and grave. "Not assassins, not foot soldiers. These are specialists, fixers, loyal only to their contracts, to the highest bidder, to absolute deniability." The implications were stark. The Shadow Society was now deploying its most covert assets, the specialist fixers who operated in the gray areas, leaving no direct fingerprints, only fear and calculated chaos. Their previous tactics of grand manipulation were shifting to more personal, insidious attacks. This was not a clash of ideologies. It was a ruthless business transaction, and Layla's family was the collateral. The realization settled heavy between them, a grim understanding of the enemy's true nature. They were not fighting a public organization, but a hydra of clandestine operators. Rashid immediately rallied their network, his voice a steel-edged command through secure channels. A global subpoena was launched, not against named individuals, but against the Shadow Society's enforcers, their shadowy front companies, and the intricate web of shell corporations that shielded their illicit activities. It was a digital dragnet, cast wide to ensnare the elusive contractors and dismantle their infrastructure piece by piece. Legal teams across continents worked tirelessly, coordinating their efforts to expose the financial arteries feeding this clandestine operation. But Layla knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that legal action, however swift and coordinated, moved slowly. When a personal threat loomed over an innocent life, her decision was swift, born of a primal need to protect. Brooklyn, her mother's home, a place of comforting routine, now a potential target. She prepared for immediate departure, her movements precise, a phantom in the night, shedding her public persona. The cover was deep, every detail meticulously planned, designed to make her disappear from the world stage, a ghost moving through familiar streets, unseen by those who sought to harm her. She would be just another face in the bustling cityscape, a daughter returning home, yet armed with a fierce resolve and the quiet strength of someone who had faced down empires. The press conferences, the global investigations, the strategic maneuvers, all faded into the background. Now, it was personal. It was about one woman, her mother, and the daughter who would become a protector, a shadow standing guard against the encroaching darkness. Her flight was booked for dawn, a new clandestine mission, silent and solitary, a personal crusade to shield the one person she held dearest. Rashid al-Ahmadi felt a change in purpose as Layla moved through Brooklyn's quiet streets, a phantom determined to protect her mother. The immediate storm had passed, but the threats that had shadowed Layla's family exposed deeper, clandestine forces. As investigations continued and the Shadow Society's networks were dismantled, Rashid reconsidered where true power lay. His empire's fragility and the betrayals he had endured taught him that strength came from transparency and shared purpose. Wandering the hushed halls of the Palacio al-Ahmadi, his dark bisht brushing the floor, he no longer wore it as a shield of solitude, but as the cloak of a humbled, transformed leader. The skyline outside, once a monument to solitary ambition, now suggested a more inclusive dream. He called a new kind of council. In a sunlit modulus, tapestries and turquoise accents framing the room, gathered not only his closest advisors, but also Layla, returned, still bearing the weight of her mission, and, unexpectedly, Zara. Their reconciliation had been hard-won, forged by danger and a shared desire to dismantle the monster they had once helped build. Zara, in an embroidered caftan, moved with a tempered gravity, her ambition refined by its costs. She offered no easy apologies, only a fierce pledge to help rebuild. Rashid spoke with steady resolve. "We have seen how unchecked power and hidden agendas warp truth and erode trust. My empire stood on shifting sands. With Layla's clarity and Zara's hard-won wisdom, we will build an oasis, one of integrity." He announced, the Integrity International Foundation, a global initiative for ethical AI, radical transparency in technology, and universal digital privacy. Layla, once a housemaid and now an indispensable strategist, became co-leader, her intellect and moral compass steering the Foundation's mission. Zara lent her deep corporate knowledge and insight into Jin's vulnerabilities, shaping the safeguards she had once sought to exploit. Their aim was bold: to redefine power away from corporate shadow play toward community-rooted truth. They imagined a world where a crescent moon signified renewal of trust, and where Layla's emblem, the desert rose, thrived across digital landscapes. The immediate work was practical and vast, building alliances across continents, uniting lawmakers, scholars, and civil society to draft unprecedented protocols for data governance and AI ethics. They would dismantle systems of digital exploitation and replace them with frameworks of justice and accountability. Standing tall in an appropriate abaya, Layla addressed their growing network with quiet authority. This is about protecting dignity and safety in the digital age, empowering people to control their data and making transparency the default. Rashid watched with a proud, knowing look. In lifting her, he had rediscovered strength. Zara added, "My mistakes showed the cost of unbridled ambition. This foundation is our chance to heal and ensure technology serves humanity. Where they once pursued destruction, they now committed to creation. Privacy as an unassailable right, justice accessible to all, accountability woven into every advancement." The fight continued, but together they built something intended to endure: resilience, redemption, and the quiet power of truth. God bless.